Hello, and welcome to another video for the Criminology course. In this video, we're going to talk about differential association theory. So without further ado, let's get started. Differential association theory is based on learning theories. Some of the things you need to know about learning theories is that they assume that our attitudes and behavioral decisions are acquired via communication after we are born. That is, individuals are born as a blank slate, or as the academic term would say, using the Latin words, tabula rasa, period. Criminal and non-criminal behavior is learned through cultural values that are internalized. That is, they are socially constructed as being okay. And those are socially constructed, as we will see, through interaction with others or the influence of peers and significant others on that individual's behavior. Now, family is the primary influence in childhood. Friends in middle school and high school become a greater influence per social learning theory. So the historical context, we need to talk about Edwin Sutherlund. Now, even though this says Principles of Criminology as his book, the first editions were simply called Criminology. At the time that he published this book in 1924, and for those of you who are following the history, that is a year before Park and Burgess published their book, The City. Sutherlund published his book, Principles of Criminology, in 1924. It was an attempt to simply describe the status of the field of criminology at that time. Now, in the book, he used classical conditioning to explain criminal behavior. And he was interested in how criminal values and attitudes could be culturally transmitted from one generation to the next. What is important to know about Sutherlund is that he came from the Midwest, and he had very strong Midwestern rural values. Yet much of his work was done at the University of Chicago and then at Indiana University. He was at the University of Chicago when Principles of Criminology was published. Also at the University of Chicago at that time were Park and Burgess. Unaffiliated by this time with the University of Chicago, but collaborators with Park and Burgess were two other criminologists, Shaw and McKay. All four of those men were friends with Donald Sutherlund. Very important to understand that. Now, as Sutherlund published subsequent editions of Criminology, he eventually came up with the title of Principles of Criminology, and I believe it was Shaw of the Shaw and McKay that I just mentioned that told Sutherlund that he had actually identified a theory of crime in his book, The Principles of Criminology. At first, Sutherlund did not buy this, but as he looked at it in more depth, he realized that he had begun to enunciate a theory of crime. So this is the book, Principles of Criminology. Now, 1992 is the last edition. Now, Sutherlund had died 42 years prior to that. Donald Cressy had helped him with a couple of editions before he died, and then he published some extra editions after Sutherlund died, And then Luckenbill, who was a student of Cressy's, Cressy was a student of Sutherlund, so Luckenbill published the last edition, so his name is on it, in 1992. This definition of criminology is on page 3 of that 11th edition. But this definition was part of the original publication in 1924. This is a definition of criminology. Criminology is the body of knowledge regarding crime and delinquency as social phenomena. It includes within its scope the processes of making laws, breaking laws, and reacting to breaking laws. So that covers everything today that we know of as criminology and criminal justice. In general, we say that those are two sides to the same coin. Well, this is the definition for the whole coin. So there are 9 elements of differential association. And I'm not going to read all of these. You will have the PowerPoint presentation available to you in the Blackboard course room. But I'm going to leave this slide up just long enough for you to read it on the screen. But the most important part of all of this is that criminal behavior is learned in interaction with others in a process of communication. So as you go through these, notice the different points. So point number 1 is criminal behavior is learned. Okay, now that doesn't separate differential association theory from other social learning theories. But the specific direction of motives and drives is learned from definitions of the legal codes as favorable or unfavorable. So that means attitudes or beliefs about those legal codes. Does someone believe that the law is good or bad? Do they believe that the law governing, let's say, theft is wrong? Do they have that belief, or do they believe that that is a good law? So the elements of differential association has to do with these definitions. So all of us have a definition about whether it's okay or not to break the law. And that's what number 5 is getting at, those attitudes or definitions. So number 6 is the defining element of differential association theory. A person becomes delinquent because of an excess of definitions favorable to violation of the law over definitions unfavorable to violations of the law. In other words, they differentially associate with individuals who hold definitions favorable to breaking the law a whole lot more than they have associations with people who hold definitions that are unfavorable to violation of the law. That is the key definition of differential association theory. That's the thing that sets it apart from other social learning theories. Very important to keep in mind. Now, Sutherlund also published a book called White Collar Crime. Now, he died in 1950. Had he been alive just 2 to 3 more years, because of this book, he may very well have been called before the McCarthy Committee on, or HUAC, the House Un-Americans Activities Committee, which was, so he might have been called before the committee and accused of being a communist because of this book. What Sutherlund proposed is that we should look at crimes committed by people who are looked upon favorably by the police, who use their position in a company to commit crime. It might be to commit crime in favor of the company. It might be to commit crime against the company, such as embezzlement. But this book was very novel in its time. Now, we talk about white-collar crime a lot today, and we have all sorts of definitions. It's hard to define what that means. This term was used first by Sutherlund, and he used it in a speech he made before he wrote this book, in a speech he made as president or accepting the presidency of the American Sociological Society, now called the American Sociological Association. So he used that term, and he really put criminology on its head. He upended the apple cart, because criminology was focused on traditional street crime. And Sutherland is saying, we've got folks committing crimes over here that it may not be a violation of criminal law, but it is a crime, such as cheating people, lying in advertising, things like that. It's important to understand that about Sutherland. His Midwest values meant that he valued property, but it also meant that he valued simplicity and honesty. By the way, those Midwestern values kind of fit in with the idea of Emil Durkheim when he talked about the mechanical to the organic society. Sutherland came from a mechanical society, but his adult life was spent in an organic society. He's also similar to Park and Burgess's social disorganization theory, because he talks about the relationships, the interactions within the culture. So Sutherland basically theorized that crime occurs when associations favorable to violation of the law outweigh associations favorable to conforming to the law. So that is differential association theory. By the way, Principles of Criminology is still in print. This is my copy, the 11th edition. You can see that it's a pretty thick book. Okay, so if you decide to get it and read it, it's a pretty thick book. I want you to notice that the print is very small as well. So it is of text, before you get to the bibliography, it is 597 pages. Yes, that's right, 597 pages. If you want to read it, that would be great. You don't need to read it for this class. I certainly don't believe you have enough time to read it by the end of the semester, but it is good to read it when you get a chance. Now, if you don't know, you should know this now, and that is that in your professional life, you should constantly be looking for and reading books and research articles related to your profession. So once you're out of school and you have the time, okay, get this book and read it. Okay, never give up reading. Learning is a lifelong thing, and you cannot learn without reading. Now, there might be some things that you need to do without reading, but if you're not reading, what you're learning by experience has nothing to organize it. It is just your experience. Sometimes in writing, people have experienced the same thing, but they experience it differently than you. What they're facing, the content of what they're facing is the same thing, but how they felt in that experience. What they got out of that experience might be very different. That's one of the limits of experience. So please keep reading once you're out of school. It will make you a much better criminal justice professional. We'll see you next video.